What's up, everybody? It is Mark from Ichiban Games, and these are the final rules of Alchemazam. This is the video guide, so you can check everything. And remember, the timestamps are in the video description. Join that Discord so you can meet the community and play against them. And always remember, we have the game database and rule set for you to check out as well in the Google Drive. Remember, you can go and play this game on www.untap.in for free. All you got to do is sign up and log in, or on Tabletop Simulator. Not free, but also fun. So, with that, here's that disclaimer one more time, and let's get to it. We are on to card abilities. Card abilities are just abilities that can happen from a card. They'll always show the type of ability, being it alchemic or magical or whatever, and then it will show the speed. So if it's spell speed or instant speed, and then some will show a faction. Not all of them do, but some might show a faction. It's usually elemental, and then triggers may have this as well. So let's go over the 5 forms here. There is magical ability, which is of thematically be magical origin, once again blocked by spell proof. Alchemic ability, which is thematically of alchemic origin, blocked by anti-targeting. There is physical abilities, which are thematically of physical origin, like force fights and such, and also throwing objects or just regular targeting, and that is also blocked by anti-targeting. So there you go. And then there is just straight up ability that's not classified. That is just like, you know, this draws a card. There's some things that just aren't any kind of real thematics to it. It just happens. And then there's static abilities, which those static abilities are, it causes something to trigger and affects the board state because the creature exists or it's satisfying a condition. So basically the way that these things can all be performed are a couple different ways, which you have the static ability, like I mentioned. It's because something will exist, it will make a trigger happen. There's an activated ability, which you will physically make an action for this. Sometimes you turn the creature to perform the action. Maybe you'll use resources, whatever. But you activate it. It's an action that happens. And then there is a triggered ability, which is an ability that triggers from an effect, which is sometimes usually from a static ability. So there are many types of special abilities that cards can do, and here we are going to go through them. So there's Peek, which is look at the top card of your deck. Sometimes it'll say, like, if you want to keep it on top or put it to the bottom, but it's always just looking at the top card. There is Flick, that removes a creature from the field back to a player's hand. There is Throwing or Dropping. It's a physical ability where thematically a card can grab another card and throw it. Sometimes it's even weapons. It might be something in the hand, whatever. But damage of the thrown card and damage for what it hits is shown, where it's throw the number and then hit the number. Attributes don't apply in this, so if, like, something with fatal hits something as a throw, which would normally just kill it on contact, that won't happen. And then cards that are in the air can't be grabbed unless they're in the air, and hiding in magical cards can't be grabbed unless if, like, it said so. Next, we have Force Fight, which is a card that will target another card. This is a physical ability, which will basically do combat against it one-on-one, is how that works. There's no interference, and attributes apply and all that kind of stuff. Linking. Linking is when there's creatures or weapons or whatever that join as one unit, and it can perform different things. There's magical links, there's physical links, there's ones that are with combat. It all depends. So when a link gets broken, the link does not happen, and some cards will specify when they unlink. So They are usually unlink at the end of when it's done, but some might be until the player's next turn or whatever. So, Ride. Ride is when two creatures act as one, but hold individual properties. They share the good and the bad is how that works. And you can mount or dismount once per turn as a manual thing, and they will be able to attack if they and do this if they don't have stasis. So if it was to be where something was to attack and it was hidden, they and riding, they both have to be doing that to both hide. So there's that. And then mounts can only both in the air if they want to ride each other and they're aerial. So mostly they just have to be on the land. So if a mount dies while it's flying, the rider will fall and die. So there is that too. Feed. You will turn and sacrifice cards, banishing them under the card you're feeding, and it will gain attributes, abilities. Might be certain things like it can make a card grow or morph or do whatever. So there you go. And cards go to limbo after something is destroyed. So, and then there's eating. Eating takes cards from an opponent and banishes them onto the card that ate, and it can gain attributes and abilities that way. So, and if that's destroyed, those cards will also go to limbo. If two cards clash that can eat each other, then they both get destroyed. Then there's banishing. Banishing is send a creature to limbo where it can't return to the game unless noted. Next we have shield, which signified by the card's text. Creatures with this ability may instantly have themselves step in front of a card or use another card by taking it and putting it in front of itself for a shield, soaking up any damage. So like a card like Heavy Armor Protector, it can go in front of a creature to soak up damage. Or say Fighting Master can go and take a card and put it in front of itself, and basically any damage that would come through would soak up the damage for those. So it would either protect or protect itself. It just depends on the card text. The next ability is to steal, where stealing is a card that will take a resource card and put it underneath them. And when they do that, there is a carry limit of how much they can go and steal. Anything that is a resource that the stealer is stolen of using, spending, or sacrificing will turn, and then it will go back to the player that it came from. But if it is not a resource, it will go to the graveyard of that controller. The next ability is the Contain ability, which takes a card off the field and puts it underneath another card. There's a contain limit of how much can be contained, and as long as that card exists on the field, it will stay contained unless the container wishes to go and release it. If that's the case, that container is incapacitated, and it can only do that once per turn of a contain or release. Morphing is when a creature turns into another card by placing a token directly on top of it. The creature unturns, and when it morphs, it has stasis. But morphing is at spell speed, and when a creature morphs, it may do a trigger. If the creature morphs, has equipment's enchantment and stuff on it, it will do that. The card doesn't go to the graveyard for the original one. It's just upgraded. Fusing is when a bunch of creatures turn into one creature, where it will basically stagger the cards, and then you could have the stats there that will apply all of their stats together, plus a couple little attributes more to it. So it will be a new creature, and it does not keep any kind of equipment or enchantments or anything like that. There's also creatures that can unfuse as well, and there you go. Alright, so I'm going to give you guys some visuals here. I'm using untap.in because it will be very easy to do so. So the first thing that we are going to go over is the ability of Peak, where when, say, this guy comes out. This is a Goblin Scout. When he comes out, it'll be able to look at the top of your deck. And that's what Peek does. So you just check it, and oh, there it is. And you can reveal it or not reveal it. It just depends on what you want to do. And there you go. But that's how it is. And you'll be able, on Untap, you can go and like see what you have there. So that's pretty cool. So that is one of the abilities. Next ability would be Flick. And Flick is when you have a creature come out on the field like Tamper of Gus. Tamper of Gus will go and shoot a creature back to the opponent's hand. So that's what's going to happen here. And if it is tokens, like how I've got these ones as tokens, it is going to shoot them off the field because tokens do not go back to a player's hand. So it's like, oh yeah, these guys, yeah, they're going bye-bye. So, you know, bye-bye. So yeah, you have that. Now, and some creatures need to have that actual ability go through. Like this one has to go through. If you shoot a fireball at this and kill this creature, its ability won't go off because of the game check that happens for the creature. So there are a couple creatures that go and do that. Next would be Stonesmith, and let me just get this guy on the field. There we go. Next is Stonesmith. So Stonesmith can go and throw. It does a throw ability. Now, as you can see, it has a throw damage of 2 and a hit damage of 2. So this thing would basically be like this. This thing is going to throw into him, which this will do 2 damage to that, and then this would get 2 damage to it. And that is what is known there. So certain things destroy, some things don't when on contact. It all depends on what the card says. So there is that. The next ability is Force Fight, where this creature, the Longhorn Wyvern, will fight this creature right here. So it is a one-on-one battle between this guy and this guy. So it's still going to have like damage like a fight would. So it's going to do 5 attack to its 1 defense, and this will do 1 attack to its 6 defense. So, I mean, obviously, you know who's going to win. But, yeah, next we have Link. So let's get Link. Let's get Lincoln. Okay, so this one is 2 Will-O-Wisps will link. So basically, it will be 2 creatures linking and doing a thing, and it will. This one's a magic link, so it'll do a magic to a creature is what it will do. So these will link. They will turn and do the magic, which they will pretty much just target this thing and blast it like just out of the water. That thing is toast right there. So yeah, that is what Link is. How they get together. Now, if that chain was broken, it would just that wouldn't end up happening. If that thing, one of them, like got killed, that spell would not occur. So next we are going to do Ride, and Ride is where if this doesn't have stasis or whatever, basically it would be like, oh, this is the mount. The mount is going to go on it. It's kind of weird. So wolf riding a big bird, but whatever, doesn't matter. So basically they become as 1. So that attack is 1. This attack, here, make it easier there. That attack is 1, and this attack is 3, which makes it a 4, and then This is a 2 and a 2. So basically, this creature is a 4/4/0, is how that works. And it gets the benefits and non benefits of the creatures. So let's say that this guy, he's got Pierce here, which means that all the overage that is going to happen, because these are now a 4/4, is going to go and bash through to the player. And this being a 1/1, that player is going to get hit for 3 damage when that happens. So basically, yeah, boom. That is a little heavy hitter. Pretty good. But let's say like this guy was able to throw a rock or something and was able to kill the mount, or kill the rider. Uh, I mean, the attack would still be happening, but the thing is that one of them would die, and the less benefits that it would have. So there is that. Now, do remember that, let's say if it was a flying creature or whatever, it could only mount in the air, and it would only be able to, let's say if it was a creature that was hidden, both of them would have to be hidden, not just one. So that's how that works there. So there's that. But yeah, let's actually bring this guy back so I can show you this next card. So there's another thing called feed and eat. Feed is when you feed things resources. It will be underneath, and they will get attributes, or they will get counters, or whatever else interesting things that would happen. But this card has eat, not feed. Eat is when, say, like let's say this guy had an equipment. Let's say that guy had a stone shield or something, right? So let's say that this guy attacks and this guy blocks. This thing would eat that other equipment. If there were 2 of these, say this thing was that guy had this thing, this would also be eaten, so they'd both be destroyed. But basically what happens is this would be banished underneath, and then this thing would get its benefits because of it. So that's how that works there. And then sometimes there's even cards that can kind of release things to do damage or whatever. It's a little interesting, pretty cool. And feeding and eating could make creatures just become bigger. They could turn into other creatures. Think of like maybe a baby dragon becoming a big dragon, things like that. So yeah, little interesting stuff in the mix. So I am going to show you 2 more here. Here we go, cloning you guys, because you have to link to do your power, so I might as well do it right? So these guys have a link magic ability, but they will banish something off the field. So if these guys are banished something, so if they're banishing, what that means is this is going to pop right to limbo. This is just going there. Bye-bye, you are gone. Not coming back in the game, and there is that. That's how that works. So, yeah, with banish, it will help get rid of some of those big nasties that don't want to go away and won't die. So there's that. All right, so I'm switching up the deck here just to go and show you Shield. As you can see, there's 2 different kinds of cards that use it in 2 different ways. This one is basically it shields another creature to soak up damage, and then this one right here will use other creatures to soak up damage so it does not get hurt. So let me show you basically what that is. So we'll do this one first right here. So let's just move this guy out of the way. All right, so as you can see, this one at instant speed can shield 1 creature targeted from any target attack or spell or ability. So let's say that this right here, this guy was to go and cast a Fireball Blast on, say, this creature right here, which would end up killing it instantly. This creature can come in and be the shield to get hit for that damage that would occur from that fireball blast. So that would happen. So that's basically how that works for the shield that way. Now, when it comes to this creature here, basically this one is when blocking, you may take a target attacking opponent creature and use it for a shield. So basically what this means is this. Say that these guys are attacking, and they're attacking. So they're attacking through. What could happen is this guy will be like, oh, I'm going to grab this creature here, and it can go and do that, and then this one will block. He'll still block like that guy, right? So this creature is going to make its attack go, they're going through, but he is going to use a shield. So that damage is 4. This creature that is now its shield is 3. This creature is going to end up dying, and it's still going to do at least damage to this guy if that was the case. So yeah, there is that. That's pretty wild for how that works. So that can happen, and that's how certain shields can work. It all depends on the text of the cards, and that's how it goes. And now on to stealing. So then we have this guy. So let's say Sandstorm Thief. If he was to attack you and hit you, or comes even out on the field, it steals. This one steals a gold or glyph. So basically, this would go underneath this guy, is how that would work. And I have to do it like that. So basically, it would go underneath him. And with this, it would be turned, because it would come in on my turn. And what would happen is, next turn, if it was my turn and I wanted to go and spend it, I could go and spend that gold or glyph, but it would go back to the pile that's on there. And I could use that for any kind of spells or anything. Just goes back to the player there. So that's how that works. I can't use it for melding or anything like that, but I can take resources off my opponent's field and I can use them for my own, but there is only a limit to go and do that, and this guy has a limit of 1 is how that works. So alrighty, so next we have the contain ability, and the contain ability is pretty cool, where say this guy, he will basically do what stealing is, but a little bit different here. So this a contain ability would suck the creature up and contain it, and the opponent can't get the contained creature back up until this guy is gone, is how that works. So, and this guy especially, he can go and take cards from people as well. So that's how that works. Now let's say if this guy died, if he died, then what would happen is this guy, because he was on the field, goes back to the field. This guy right here goes back to the player's hand because it was in the player's hand. So it would go back to its original source. Sometimes you might want to have a token on that, or however you might want to kind of show that sort of thing. So aside from that, and if this thing had counters on it and such too, it would get the counters back, because contain is the only thing that does that. Banish will not do that, and certain banishing underneath cards will not do that either. But here is the last two that we have to go over, which is morphing. Now, this kind of creature, it gets power counters, so it will end up morphing. If it spends 3 power counters, well, you can go and have that caterpillar turn into a moth chrysalis. So there's that. It becomes a new creature. It is the same creature, but it's a new type for that creature, where that creature just turns into something a little more upgraded. So it will do that. And then what will happen is eventually, because this thing is cool because it's got 2 sides to it, it will get power counters, it'll spend, and then this will flip over to here, and it will become a moth. So there's some that even have double sides when they're morphing. So that's pretty cool. And then finally, we have fusing. So we have, say, 3 Wolf of Barren Wastes. If you have 3 Wolf of Barren Wastes, they can fuse into a Cerberus. So basically, fusing will go like this. It's a little bit different than morphing. When it's the morphing, the creatures don't go to the graveyard. Well, neither will these. If it was the case where that thing went to the graveyard, it would do so, and the other parts would go off. But these guys don't go to the graveyard. They are just fused on. There's 3 of them. So, and they're each a 1/2 creature, but it makes it a big creature. And as you can see, it's got, in the attack and defense, it's got the pluses there. So it will be where it's a 1 extra attack. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4 attack, and 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 defense. So it is a beefy boy, where it is a 4/8. So yeah, pretty cool. That's how the stats go on these things. And some creatures can unfuse. This one actually can unfuse, and when they unfuse, they do certain things. Now, some creatures can unfuse instantly, some can't. But normally, it will always be a fusing and an unfusing at spell speed. There's never really much of morphing having anything that's not instant speed for that, but usually spell speed. So, but yep, these creatures will become a new creature, and they will do things. Some creatures are a little bit upgraded of a creature depending on what the morph says too. So that is all that for you. We're talking triggers. So triggers are abilities that causes a card or something to do an action. It's basically a reactionary response to a condition. You can cancel these as well for a bunch of different ones. So there's an order of operations that basically happens with triggers, and they kind of do go in this order. So phase triggers, that is basically when something goes to the phase, like an upkeep phase, or going into combat, or declaring attackers or blockers or such. There's the enter the field phase. When a card enters the field, it will when it touches down, it will do something. There's certain effects that don't trigger unless they're totally satisfied. Which an example of that is Tamper of Gust, which comes on the field and you have a chance to destroy it, but if it stays, its effect goes off. Then there's damage triggers, which specifically from the text, depending if it is a card taking damage or dealing damage, is the trigger will happen. And then death triggers, which when the card is destroyed is when that would happen. And that could also be from sacrificing. Then there's also exits the battlefield, which can go in tandem with things of a death trigger or something of that, be banishing or sacrificing. So there's that there. And it refers to the stack as well for the order of operations, where you can have that on the stack and respond. We have a couple other triggers too, like manual triggers, like when flight effects, you make something go into the air or land or hide or emerge, and then when something fuses or unfuses, or when something morphs, or when something has a static ability where it just causes a trigger to happen because of the board state of a creature existing and it satisfies a condition. So there's that. Then there's also game triggers, which is stuff like poison counters, or when a creature enters the field, it must resolve staying on the field, which is what I said about the Tamper of Gusts. So it's that kind of thing. And then there can be other triggers too, like when this creature is satisfied or when the spell is cast, and so on. Next is item enchantment and land rules. Items, when they enter the field, can be used. They have no stasis for that. Equipment, same thing. It can be equipped if it enters the field. And to equip it, all you have to do is turn a resource. Or if it's a runestone, get rid of that. Or element resources, get rid of two of the same, and you could equip that as well. If an equipped creature dies or goes to limbo, the equipment drops off unless noted. Enchantments come into the field immediately active unless noted. Enchantments can attach to a player's field, creatures, tableaus, graveyards, decks, whatever. That can be for an opponent player as well. An opponent player can't sacrifice the enchantment, but they can sacrifice, like, say, a creature that has an enchantment on it. They have that would destroy the enchantment. But yeah, when it comes to enchantments being attached to a creature, that's when the stats of an enchantment mean something for its stats. Or if it was turned into a creature somehow. And finally, lands. Lands are special enchantment style cards where creatures need to visit them for things to go and happen and have them activate. They're not in stasis, but to be activated, there has to be creatures that visit them. And you can go and have a creature manually visit them once per turn, or get off of them once per turn, either or. So when a creature comes off a land, it doesn't have stasis. And lands, when they can't be destroyed by normal enchantment destruction or be removed by playing banishes or anything like that, unless noted. So if a land is destroyed, creatures go back to the field and have stasis, unless noted as well. All right, a little more visuals here. So we have the items. If an item comes out on the field, it can automatically be used. This one would be able to give me 2 life points if that was the case. But let's say this thing turned into a creature, it would not be able to attack because it would have stasis. So do remember that it is a rule for that. And that goes for anything. It could even be an enchantment or, anything. So that is the case for anything that's an inanimate object or not a creature token that could be turned into a creature token. So, but items are get to be able to be used right away, and that is pretty cool. So that is that for that. And then we have equipments. So equipments, they can be equipped right away. If I wanted to be like, yeah, I'm gonna turn these because it only takes one. So whatever, if it was one, it'd be equipped right away and be like, yeah, cool. This is 1, 2, 3. You have to just turn one for that equip cost right there, or to unequip. So if I want unequip, if I wanted to re-equip, let's say that this thing was out, I wanted to transfer it, I could go and do that. So that's how that works. It's just the equip cost. You just turn something. If it was a runestone, I'd have to get rid of it. Or if it was, a pearls or any kind of 2-like elemental resources, then I would end up getting rid of those as well, and that would be the same thing. So that's how it would take the place of it being one of these over here. So that is how equipment works on that. And when equipment, if this creature was to attack and it was to die, the equipment would fall off. If it gets contained, the equipment comes with it. That is how it goes for that. So, next would be an enchantment. Now, say this one's the perfect example because this, if it's put on something, it would have it be where it is stronger. So you can see it's a got stats there. Well, it's applied to the creature, so it's stronger. And that's, let's say, if this was a something coming to life as well. That's what its stats would be there, unless if noted off a card or something. But either way. But let's say that you attach this to the field because this thing can be attached to a field. So once that happens, it ignores the stats that are there, and then what ends up happening, it would be like, well, okay, let's say I melded this turn. Well, if I ended up melding, it would gain me 5 life. So, yeah, these all just do certain effects, and as soon as they come out on the field, they are, boop, they're right there, they're done, they're good to go. So it doesn't matter, they are just happening, unless noted. So that is that. And then finally, we have the last card here, which is a land. And land enchantment is basically, it's active, but only really active if creatures visit it. So let's say these creatures are visiting. If this guy was to attack, these guys can't block. They're visiting the land, but because of that, these will get power counters and do certain things. And it's pretty cool. Now, let's say that, on my next turn I wanted to remove these creatures out of there. They would not have stasis. They would be fine and dandy. They're just coming back and whatever. Now, these could end up losing their power counters or whatever they get if creatures come off it or however, but some stay. So, but if this was to be destroyed, then these creatures come back and they're in stasis because they're, kind of like, mind is a little twerked. So these you can destroy with special enchantment destruction. And that is it for that. Next, we're going to be talking about ailments and conditions. This could go and be on a player or on a creature. It all depends on what it is. So they're just things that hinder a player. First things first is poison. Poison is a condition on a player where when a creature poisons a player, the player gets that many units of poison on them, and basically at the end of that player's turn, they will receive damage for the half the value of the units that are on them rounded up. So basically it's like if I've got 1 unit on me, it would be 1 damage because it's 0.5, but if you round that up, it's 1. And then 2 is 1, 3 is 2, 4 is 2. So what happens, it just goes up by 1 every 2 is really how it kind of works from terms of the damage. So that should be an easy way to think of it. Next is curses. Curses come in many different forms. They just impede the player. It could result in things of win conditions against the player. It could be where they can't do something like it takes extra resources to cast spells or something like that. Stasis is a condition where when a card enters the field, it can't attack or perform any kind of activated abilities. Creatures and anything that was turned into a creature usually has this. When a card ascends or lands or hides or emerges, it also has stasis. Stun is a condition where a card can't attack or block or perform any kind of activated abilities for so many turns. Stun cards in combat and forced fights deal 0 damage. And then there's stone, which A card that's turned to stone also can't perform any kind of abilities, but also triggers don't occur, and the stone cards in force fights deal 0 damage as well. And remember, if a card is flying and turned to stone, it will land and then shatter. So remember that too. Charmed or entranced gives a player control of a card depending on what that card text says. Now, that means like you could have 2 cards end up fighting each other, or you could have it be where you have total control over a card and it's on your side of your field, and you can have it fight for you and do a activated ability or something. Usually those cards, when that happens, go back to the other player's field at the end of that player's turn. And then there's Banish, which there's 2 types of banishment. Banished going to limbo means a card will be unable to come back to the field. And then banished outside of limbo is a card is banished outside of limbo and unable to come back to the field until something occurs that to the thing that banished it. So that could be like, say, if something contained a creature or something of that nature. Then there is the loss of abilities, which means that, let's say, something had spell proof, and then spell proof was taken away from them up until the end of turn. Something of that nature. So, and then finally there's unusable, which is a game condition where a card can't perform any kind of action until the player's next turn is allowed. It's possible for triggers to occur, but this can't be cured in any kind of way. The only other things that cannot be quote-unquote cured would be like banished out of limbo, or in limbo, that kind of thing there. Lastly, we're going to get into some other rules of the game. These are just random rules that everybody should kind of know what's what. One is card text versus game rules. That is basically where a card's text supersedes any official rules that are up on the list. There are some exceptions to a couple of things because they will talk about how those game rules are implied for the cards, but it is generally where a card text will override what is on a game rule. Next is ingredients must have a function. Players cannot turn ingredients on their field if they don't have an action to perform. So that means like you can't just turn it so if a player is able to control your tableau that you can't go in and have that happen. So tableau ingredients come into your tableau turned if they're not in the ingredient phase. That means all gold, glyphs, any rune stones, any elemental resources, whatever, will always come in turned if it's not during the ingredient phase. I mean, if it's in the ingredient phase, you will end up getting those, vertically, so they're able to be used. So you can't go and do that for if it is not in that phase. When sacrificing a tableau ingredient, you must turn it to do so. So it's not like you can turn it and use it and then you can sacrifice it to use it. You have to turn it to do that. Using creatures as resources, certain cards allow creatures to use them as ingredients, such as a flesh bond chimera. Any ailment that makes a creature unable to turn cannot aid in this type of casting. If a card becomes a creature when it enters the battlefield that turn, it has stasis. If it's an item, it can perform its activated abilities, but it can't attack. Next would be cards that target the field. Certain cards can target the field, like it was said before, but these bypass spellproof, anti-targeting, and resistant creatures. These can only be canceled. So remember that. And then something called the sub-hand casting. So you do have something called a sub-hand, which basically is there's an area where your cards for when you play certain cards under certain conditions are able to be in this secondary hand of cards, if you will. This is not to help confuse opponent players for certain things, and it's mainly where it's like a card like, say, Persistent Zombie. When it comes back from the graveyard, it gets grave counters. So you can't go and have a card in your hand and then have counters on top of that card. You just have it face down and with those counters on it, so people know that, oh, this is what that is from. That's just where it will be casting out of. So the same thing for, say, Revolving Door. Revolving Door is where you will get cards that you can cast for free, and you make sure you don't mix those into your hand. If that's the case, they will be able to be cast out of your sub-hand for that turn. Next, we get into rules of controlling another player's tableau. Certain cards will allow you to do this. Cards like, say, Pickpocket or Goblin Thief, they'll let you be able to use the resources that they have. If it's an opposing player's turn, it can only happen after they've performed their first action on their main phase. And if it's on your turn, you can just do it whenever. This is why there are no turning of any resources that you can't go and use something for. So you cannot turn a player's creatures to do any kind of casting as well, like, say, Fleshbond Chimera. So, and this stuff doesn't happen at any kind of, like, second upkeep or, say, during any other phases other than the main phases and even possibly combat phases. So, and then rules of controlling another player's creature. If you go and you have the creature on your side of the field, you can activate its abilities and such, but you could also, say, sacrifice it. If you did that, it would go back to the owner's graveyard, and you could go and fuse this creature as well to other creatures, but that would only come back to them if that creature was killed or if it unfused. You could also go and, let's say, if you took control of a creature that had equipment, you could technically transfer that equipment to another creature, but that creature could not go and transfer equipment or anything like that or unequip it, because that would go back to the player then for that equipment. So that also happens if that creature was killed or went into limbo or anything of that. Then there is something called the association rule. If a creature is equipped or enchanted or linked or rides another creature that is associated with a faction, it is also associated with that faction as a whole. So it's kind of like, say, if a creature is resistant to water and there's a creature that has some sort of water equipment that is attached to them, that means that that resistant creature will resist any damage that would be from that. And then finally is contained tokens. If a token is contained, it comes back to the field if it's released. That doesn't really happen for any other type of spell or ability when it comes to tokens, because when you take them off the field, they will just go bye-bye. They're eliminated. But if it's something that has contained them, then that is where it will take them off the field, and that will happen. And finally, these two rules are going to kind of go together. This is about controlling multiple play fields, and then the creature Homunculus Apprentice and the rules that has, because it basically controls another play field as well. So basically, if you control another playfield, extra playfields have the same first and second upkeep and draw phases and resource phases that naturally happen on your turn. Any main phase or combat phase from an extra field can be done at a different time that was to happen, but it goes in the sequences of how it happens for a normal sequence of things of being main phase, combat, second main phase. So, but fixtures of any kind, as well as cards in hand and graveyards and whatever, cannot move to different fields unless it's specifically noted by the cards. So there is going to be no sharing of stuff that way. However, there is a little bit of instances of sharing that do happen, and that is when cards get drawn from your deck, and also think of it having a second player partner with you where you can use each other's resources that are there to help cast out cards. Now, also in combat, you can go and have those creatures that it has on that field help you block, but those creatures don't necessarily go in your attack. It can only go and block. And when it comes to attributes like, say, pack can only happen if it is on your field. So that's it for that. Like, you can't go and have like 2 winged Blackpool Piranhas on their field and 2 winged Blackpool Piranhas on your field, and pack will trigger. It doesn't work like that. It has to be on your field. Which also brings me to something very, very, very must be noted, which is that when a field gets extra resources, it could go and meld for the turn. However, if that melds for the turn, you cannot meld yourself for the turn, and vice versa, where if you meld for the turn, it cannot go and meld for the turn. Now, you both could go and take resources, and that's fine, but you can't double meld. And especially, one of the most important rules for this is that any treasure trove or arcane tome that is on your tableau, that is what counts towards the win condition, not that other playfield. It has to be your tableau. So do know that. Any kind of thing that dies on that other tableau or is destroyed will go to that graveyard, and if it gets banished on that field there, it will also go to that limbo. But anything of where that playfield would go away, everything would go to your graveyard except for everything in limbo goes to your limbo. So that is how that works. The only difference in why there is another rule for Homunculus Apprentice is because with Homunculus Apprentice, it is a creature itself where it makes its own playfield. So the thing is, it cannot go into its own combat or block for its combat. Basically, you have to have it block for you. You control it as a creature. And here's what happens. If that creature dies, obviously, it gets rid of that playfield. So it would go into your graveyard as well as everything that is in its playfield except for its limbo, which would go into your limbo. So then we have the rule about controlling another player's tableau. This is the Goblin Thief. It will let us turn any of our opponent player's unturned resources so we can use them. So say if I wanted to get a wolf out, I could turn their stuff to go and do so. Now, if it was their turn, I would have to wait until they did their first action first because fairness. So, yeah. So, lastly, I'm going to just show a visual of the homunculus apprentice as well as controlling another play field. And if you control another play field, it is like this. Basically, you will go and have it where it has its own tableau, it will have its own graveyard, it will have its own everything. So I always try and keep these things away from my regular resources here. But this one will specifically let you get, it gets 3 cards, and so we're going to draw 3 cards to it. Those would be played face down. I mean, you could look at them at any time, but it would get 3 cards, and then also it would get, any resources that you wish, up to 2. So it'd be, let's give it 2 gold, and that's how that works. And that'll come in turned, and it doesn't have to be from a creature. This could be from anything, but this just so happens to be a creature. And because this is a creature in your field, you will end up having it be in your battlefield. It can't be in its own battlefield. It can only be in yours where, say if a creature was to come down and want to attack you, well, its creatures, which let's say it had a creature out, it could go and block with one of its creatures. It could go and double block one from you and one from them, but that's that. So you can aid in helping cast out creatures, like say if this was like, oh, we're going to do that, and I'm going to do this to help get one of mine out or one of its out. There you go. But its creatures can't go and jump to my field. They can't do that or anything like that. It is specifically to them, and that's it. So if anything was to die, it would go to their graveyard so it could bring things back and whatnot. But if this thing dies, then these will all go bye-bye, and, just everything will just go away. And that, ladies and gentlemen, are all the rules for Alchemazam. Please go and check out the Google Drive that has all the card database on it, where you can go and check all the cards to go and build your deck. It's got everything from checking out what the resources are to the tokens, but especially the cards that would go in your deck. And I would love to go and see a lot of cool decks that happen. Please join the Discord, where you can go and meet all the community of the games that we make, but also find players to go and play this game with. There's a bunch of different sections that are in there, and definitely areas to go and play the game and battle with some friends. To go and play this game, you can play it on Tabletop Simulator or on untap.in, which untap.in is free. All you just need to do is get a login for yourself. It is free. And finally, go and check out the webpage for Ichiban Games, because there are a lot of cool games that we make and more to come. Thanks, everybody, and have a good day.